Dramily.com, unlimited drama series.
Every Sunday she visited her grandmother's grave. Catherine made it sound sacred, this weekly pilgrimage to honor family tradition. 2 hours of remembrance, she called it. I admired her devotion to the elderly woman who raised her after her parents passed in that car accident when she was 12. "It keeps me grounded, Danny," she'd say, adjusting her makeup in the hallway mirror before leaving. Granny always knew what to say when life got complicated. Catherine would dress nicely for these visits, never funeral attire, but respectful clothes that somehow managed to accentuate every curve. Her Sunday cemetery outfit consisted of a fitted black dress, low heels, and that perfume I bought her for our anniversary. She'd return home glowing, relaxed, peaceful, in a way that made me slightly envious of her grandmother's lingering influence. "How was the cemetery today?" I'd ask. Same question every week. "Peaceful," she'd reply, kissing my cheek. "I always feel better after visiting Granny. She had such wisdom." The routine continued for months. Catherine's Sunday devotion became as predictable as church bells or weekend football. She'd leave around noon, return by 4, and spend the evening unusually affectionate and talkative. Whatever conversations she had with her grandmother's memory seemed to energize her in ways our own discussions never managed. I respected the ritual. Everyone grieves differently, processes loss at their own pace. Catherine's grandmother had been her anchor during turbulent teenage years, and maintaining that connection through regular cemetery visits seemed healthy, therapeutic even. The woman deserved such devoted remembrance. The detail that changed everything came to me on a Tuesday morning while organizing our filing cabinet. Catherine had asked me to find our marriage certificate for some insurance paperwork, and I was digging through folders of important documents when I found Granny's cremation receipt. Cremation receipt? Not burial arrangements. Not cemetery plot information. A receipt for cremation services dated 3 years ago, with my signature as witness. I remembered that day clearly now. Catherine had been too emotional to handle the arrangements, so I'd driven to the crematory, signed the papers, and personally scattered Granny's ashes off Miller's Pier at sunset, just as she'd requested in her will. No grave existed. No headstone marked her resting place. No cemetery contained her remains. Catherine's weekly pilgrimage honored a location that didn't exist. I sat in our kitchen, staring at that cremation receipt, feeling my understanding of reality shift sideways. Where exactly had my wife been spending her Sunday afternoons? What kind of remembrance required 2 hours at a non-existent grave? The questions multiplied faster than I could process them. Catherine's post-cemetery glow took on different meaning. Her Sunday afternoon energy, her increased affection, her peaceful demeanor. None of it connected to grandmother's memory anymore. Something else was making my wife happy on Sunday afternoons. Something that required careful grooming, expensive perfume, and elaborate deception. I decided to find out what. Following your wife requires planning. Catherine knew my truck, recognized my usual routes, and would immediately suspect surveillance if I handled this carelessly. So I borrowed my business partner's Honda, generic gray sedan that blended into traffic, and positioned myself 3 blocks from our house the following Sunday morning. Catherine emerged at 11:50, right on schedule. She'd chosen the navy blue dress today, the one that made her look 5 years younger. Her makeup was perfect, hairstyled like she was attending a business meeting rather than visiting a cemetery. She carried her small purse and a bouquet of flowers from the grocery store. I followed at a distance, staying 2 cars back, taking note of her route. She drove past Riverside Cemetery, where most of our neighbors' relatives rested. She continued past Memorial Gardens, the newer facility with the elaborate monuments. She bypassed Hillcrest, the Catholic cemetery, where her childhood friend's grandparents were buried. Instead, Catherine navigated toward Maple Street, the area near downtown, where young professionals rented apartments in converted Victorian houses. She parked outside Willowbrook Commons, a modest complex with external staircases and individual unit entrances. The kind of place where recent college graduates lived while saving money for house down payments. Catherine didn't hesitate. She walked directly to apartment 2B, knocked twice, and waited. The door opened, revealing a man I recognized from Catherine's workplace Christmas party. Tom something. Late 20s, athletic build, the guy who'd complimented Catherine's dress while I stood right beside her, holding her coat. Tom smiled when he saw Catherine. Not the polite smile you'd give a casual acquaintance, but the intimate expression reserved for someone you know well. Very well. Catherine stepped inside without invitation, clearly familiar with the apartment's layout. The door closed behind them. I sat in that borrowed Honda for 4 hours, watching apartment 2B's windows, documenting everything in a small notebook. Catherine's car remained parked outside. No movement from the apartment. No sign of the profound grief counseling that supposedly occurred during these Sunday visits. At 4:15, Catherine emerged. Her hair was slightly mussed, makeup touched up, but not quite perfect anymore. She walked to her car with that same peaceful, satisfied expression I'd been admiring for months. The glow I'd attributed to spiritual communion with her grandmother's memory. Tom appeared briefly in his doorway, watching Catherine leave. He was wearing a bathrobe. At 4:15 on a Sunday afternoon, after hosting my wife for 4 hours of cemetery remembrance. Catherine drove home, taking her usual route, probably rehearsing her usual responses to my usual questions. I followed at a distance, my mind processing the implications of what I'd witnessed. The cremation receipt, the non-existent grave, the apartment visits, the lies wrapped in sacred family tradition. She arrived home 3 minutes before me, enough time to check her appearance in the hallway mirror and assume her post-cemetery pose of peaceful reflection. I entered through the garage, acting normal, pretending I'd spent the afternoon watching football and organizing my workshop. "How was the cemetery today?" I asked. Same question as always. "Peaceful," Catherine replied, kissing my cheek with lips that tasted like someone else's coffee. I always feel better after visiting Granny. She had such wisdom. The performance was flawless, practiced, refined through months of repetition. If I hadn't seen the cremation receipt, hadn't followed her to Tom's apartment, hadn't watched her emerge from his doorway looking thoroughly satisfied, I never would have suspected anything. But now I knew. Catherine's Sunday ritual honored nothing sacred. Her grandmother's grave was a convenient fiction that provided 4 hours of unquestioned absence every week. The devotion I'd admired was actually adultery disguised as grief. That night, lying beside my wife while she slept peacefully, I began planning my response. Evidence gathering became my new hobby. I approached it like any other project, requiring attention to detail and systematic execution. Catherine had been conducting this affair for months, possibly longer, which meant she'd become comfortable with her deception. Comfortable people make mistakes. I purchased a small digital camera with excellent zoom capability, telling Catherine I wanted to document some restoration work on vintage cars at my shop. True enough, I did photograph a few classic automobiles for cover story purposes, but the camera's primary function involved Sunday surveillance. The following week, I positioned myself across from Willowbrook Commons with a clear view of apartment 2B. Catherine arrived at 12:10, carrying flowers again. Tom answered the door, wearing casual clothes that somehow managed to look expensive despite their simplicity. They embraced briefly before disappearing inside. Through the telephoto lens, I captured their reunion. The embrace lasted longer than friendship would require. Catherine's hand lingered on Tom's chest. His fingers touched her waist with familiar ease. These weren't coworkers maintaining professional boundaries. I documented everything. Timestamps, clothing choices, body language. The flowers Catherine brought. The same grocery store bouquet she claimed to place on Granny's non-existent grave. Apparently, Tom appreciated fresh flowers in his apartment, while he entertained married women on Sunday afternoons. During the 4-hour visit, I observed occasional movement through the apartment windows, shadows passing between rooms. At one point, Tom appeared briefly in what looked like a bedroom window, shirtless, closing curtains against the afternoon sun. Catherine's shadow moved behind him. My wife emerged at 4:20, looking satisfied and peaceful. Tom watched from his doorway again, and this time wearing jeans and a wrinkled shirt. They shared a longer goodbye than the previous week, hands touching, quiet conversation, reluctant separation. I photographed it all. The next Sunday brought variations on the same theme. Catherine chose a different dress, brought different flowers, but followed identical patterns. Arrival around noon, extended greeting, 4 hours inside apartment 2B, satisfied departure, peaceful drive home to her unsuspecting husband. After 3 weeks of documentation, I had enough photographic evidence to prove the affair's existence. But proof wasn't enough. I wanted to understand the scope of Catherine's deception, the depth of her betrayal, the extent to which she'd weaponized my trust. So I expanded the investigation. Catherine's cell phone provided the next breakthrough. She'd grown careless about leaving it unattended, probably because I'd never shown interest in her private communications before. While she showered one evening, I quickly scrolled through her text messages. The conversation thread with Tom H. told the complete story. Weeks of planning Sunday visits, discussions about his apartment's privacy, complaints about having to maintain the cemetery fiction, references to activities that definitely didn't involve honoring deceased grandmothers. "Can't wait for Sunday," Tom had texted the previous Thursday. "I bought that wine you mentioned." "Perfect," Catherine had replied. "Danny thinks I'm having deep conversations with Granny. If only he knew how deep our conversations get." They'd laughed about my ignorance, made jokes about the cemetery story, shared intimate details about their Sunday afternoon activities while I sat at home, respecting my wife's need for private grief counseling. The text messages revealed something worse than simple adultery. Catherine wasn't just cheating, she was enjoying the deception itself. The elaborate lie gave her additional satisfaction beyond the affair. She liked having a secret, liked manipulating my trust, liked knowing she could disappear for 4 hours every week without raising suspicion. I photographed the relevant text messages, careful not to disturb the phone's position or alert Catherine to my discovery. Then I began planning something more comprehensive than divorce papers. Catherine wanted to play games with my trust. I'd show her how games end when you're not the only player who knows the rules. My auto repair shop became strategic headquarters for what I started thinking of as Project Sunday. The garage provided privacy, tools, and legitimate reasons to stay late without arousing Catherine's suspicion. She actually encouraged my increased work hours, probably because my absence gave her more freedom to text Tom without oversight. I spent evenings organizing evidence and developing strategy. The photographs were excellent. Clear images of Catherine and Tom embracing, entering his apartment together, sharing intimate goodbyes. The text messages provided context and timeline. The cremation receipt proved her grandmother's story was impossible, but evidence alone wouldn't satisfy me. Catherine had turned our marriage into an elaborate joke, with me as the unwitting punchline. She deserved consequences proportional to her deception. I researched Tom's background through social media and public records. 28 years old, marketing coordinator at Catherine's bank, recent graduate from State University. He rented the apartment month to month, drove a leased car, and maintained active dating profiles on multiple websites, despite his Sunday afternoon commitment to my wife. Interesting detail. Tom's dating profiles claimed he was single and looking for something real. Apparently, 4-hour weekly sessions with married women didn't qualify as real relationships in his estimation. Catherine was recreational activity, not romantic commitment. The bank employment created additional possibilities. Catherine worked in human resources, Tom in marketing. Office relationships required disclosure to management, especially when they involve potential conflicts of interest. Married employees conducting affairs with unmarried colleagues definitely qualified as conflicts requiring official documentation. I called the bank's main number and asked about employee relationship policies. The receptionist transferred me to compliance, where a helpful representative explained their strict guidelines regarding romantic relationships between staff members. All such relationships required immediate disclosure to human resources and management approval to continue employment in the same facility. We take these policies very seriously, the compliance officer explained. Undisclosed relationships can create liability issues, particularly when one party supervises or influences the other's work assignments. Catherine supervised several departments, including marketing. Tom reported to managers who reported to Catherine. Their relationship violated multiple bank policies, none of which had been disclosed according to the compliance officer's records. If you're aware of an undisclosed relationship, the officer continued, we encourage reporting it through our anonymous ethics hotline. We investigate all reports thoroughly and take appropriate action to maintain workplace integrity. I thanked her for the information and hung up, adding workplace consequences to Catherine.
Second Instagram, 47 posts, all of her. You built her a shrine. You posted her on my birthday.
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
Catherine's growing list of problems. The plan crystallized over several late evenings in my garage. Catherine had constructed an elaborate deception that touched multiple aspects of her life: marriage, family history, workplace ethics, and personal integrity. Her downfall should be equally comprehensive. I wouldn't just expose the affair. I'd dismantle the entire structure of lies she'd built around it, piece by carefully documented piece, until everyone who mattered understood exactly what kind of person Catherine really was. The beauty of my approach lay in its simplicity. I wouldn't have to fabricate anything, manipulate evidence, or resort to illegal activities. Catherine had already done the work for me. I just needed to ensure the right people saw what she'd accomplished. Starting with her sister Jennifer, who lived 2 towns over and called every Tuesday evening to check on Catherine's emotional well-being. Jennifer always asked about the cemetery visits, expressing admiration for Catherine's devotion to family tradition. It's so important to maintain those connections, Jennifer would say during their weekly conversations. Granny would be proud of how you honor her memory. Jennifer deserved to know how Catherine was actually honoring their grandmother's memory, along with Catherine's co-workers, supervisors, and the husband who'd been funding her Sunday afternoon activities without realizing it. I chose Tuesday evening for the first revelation, timing it to coincide with Jennifer's weekly call. Catherine was in the kitchen preparing dinner when her phone rang, and she answered with her usual cheerful greeting. "Hi, Jen. How was your week?" I waited until they'd covered the standard topics, work, weather, weekend plans, before walking into the kitchen with a manila envelope. "Catherine," I said calmly, "we need to discuss your Sunday cemetery visits." She looked confused, phone still pressed to her ear. "Danny, I'm talking to Jennifer. Can this wait?" Actually, Jennifer should hear this too. I opened the envelope and spread photographs across the kitchen counter. "These were taken last Sunday while you were visiting Granny's grave." Catherine's face went pale as she recognized the images. Tom opening his apartment door, their embrace on his threshold, her satisfied departure 4 hours later. The timestamps were clearly visible on each photograph. "What? How did you—" Catherine stammered. "Put Jennifer on speaker," I suggested. "She'll want to hear about your new approach to honoring family traditions." Catherine's hand trembled as she activated the speaker function. Jennifer's voice filled the kitchen, concerned and confused. "Catherine, what's happening? Danny, what photographs?" I picked up the cremation receipt and held it where Catherine could see. "Jennifer, did you know your grandmother was cremated? That I personally scattered her ashes off Miller's Pier 3 years ago? That there's no grave for Catherine to visit?" Silence from the phone. Catherine stared at me with growing panic. "I don't understand," Jennifer said slowly. "Catherine visits Granny's grave every Sunday. She's been doing it for months." "She visits someone," Bus I agreed, indicating the photographs. "Tom Harrison, 28 years old, lives at Willowbrook Commons. Catherine spends 4 hours there every Sunday, then comes home and tells me about her peaceful conversations with your cremated grandmother." I read selected text messages aloud, the ones where Catherine and Tom joked about the cemetery fiction and made plans for their weekly encounters. Jennifer's shocked silence grew heavier with each revelation. "Catherine," Jennifer whispered finally, "is this true?" Catherine tried to respond but only managed broken syllables. The elaborate deception that had seemed so clever and manageable was collapsing in real time, witnessed by the sister whose respect she'd always craved. "I can explain," Catherine managed eventually. "Please do," I said, gathering the photographs. "Explain to Jennifer how visiting your lover's apartment honors your grandmother's memory. Explain how lying to your husband about sacred family traditions demonstrates the values Granny taught you. Explain how 4 hours of adultery every Sunday helps you feel peaceful and grounded." Catherine ended the call without explanation, leaving Jennifer's confused questions echoing in the sudden silence. She stared at the evidence spread across our kitchen counter, her Sunday afternoon secret transformed into undeniable documentation of betrayal. "Danny, I never meant for this to happen," she began. "You meant for exactly this to happen," I corrected. "You planned it, executed it, and enjoyed it for months. The only thing you didn't mean was getting caught." I collected the photographs and documents, returning them to the envelope. "Tomorrow I'm calling your bank's ethics hotline to report your undisclosed relationship with Tom. Workplace affairs violate their employee conduct policies, especially when they involve supervisory conflicts of interest." Catherine's remaining color drained from her face. "You can't do that. It would ruin my career." "You've already ruined your career," I pointed out. "I'm just ensuring your employers have accurate information about their human resources manager's approach to ethical conduct." The next morning, I made the promised call to the bank's anonymous ethics hotline, providing Tom's name, Catherine's position, and general timeline of their relationship. The compliance officer assured me they would investigate thoroughly and take appropriate action. Catherine left for work that morning, not knowing her professional life was about to become as complicated as her personal life had become the previous evening. The bank's investigation moved faster than I'd anticipated. By Thursday afternoon, Catherine came home looking devastated, her usual professional composure completely shattered. "They suspended me," she announced, dropping her purse and keys on the hallway table, "pending investigation of ethics violations. Someone reported my relationship with Tom." I looked up from the newspaper I was reading, maintaining neutral expression. "What relationship with Tom?" "Don't pretend you don't know," Catherine snapped. "You're the one who reported us." They questioned both of us separately, showed us documentation of policy violations, asked about supervision conflicts, and undisclosed romantic relationships. "Sounds thorough," I observed. "Banks take compliance seriously." Catherine slumped into her chair, looking older than I'd seen her since her grandmother's actual funeral. "They're reviewing all my personnel decisions involving Tom's department, looking for favoritism, inappropriate influence, conflicts of interest. My supervisor said this could result in termination." "Probably should have disclosed the relationship when it started," I suggested. "Most companies have policies about these situations." "It wasn't supposed to become serious," Catherine said quietly. "It was just, I don't know, something different, exciting. You and I had gotten so routine, so predictable. Tom made me feel young again." "Young enough to lie about visiting your grandmother's grave?" Catherine flinched. "That was stupid. I know it was stupid. But I needed some story that would give me regular time away without questions. The cemetery seemed respectful, something you'd never want to interfere with. So you weaponized my respect for your grief," I summarized. "Used my sympathy for your loss as cover for adultery. Made me an accomplice in my own betrayal." "I never meant to hurt you, Danny." "You meant to deceive me indefinitely," I corrected. "The hurt was inevitable once the deception became unsustainable, which it was always going to become, eventually." My phone buzzed with a text message. Jennifer, asking if I could call when Catherine wasn't around. She'd been trying to process Tuesday evening's revelations and had questions about our marriage, Catherine's behavior, and what I planned to do next. "Your sister wants to talk," I told Catherine, showing her the message. "She's having trouble understanding how you turned family tradition into adultery cover story." Catherine buried her face in her hands. "Jennifer thinks I've disrespected Granny's memory. She's furious about the lies. about using our grandmother's death as deception tool. She says I've betrayed everything our family stands for. Have you? I don't know anymore, Catherine whispered. Everything seems so clear when it was just Sunday afternoons with Tom. Now it's all falling apart. My job, my marriage, my relationship with Jennifer. Tom won't even return my calls since the bank investigation started. Tom's protecting himself, I explained. He's 28, unmarried, no dependents. He can find another job, another apartment, another married woman to entertain on Sunday afternoons. You're the one with everything to lose. Catherine looked up at me with desperate eyes. Is there any way to fix this? Any possibility of working through it? I considered her question seriously, weighing months of elaborate deception against years of marriage, Sunday afternoon betrayals against shared history and mutual investment. You turned our marriage into a joke, I said finally. Made me the punchline of a story I didn't even know was being told. Used my trust as a weapon against me. Created an entire fictional narrative about honoring your grandmother while you were actually dishonoring our wedding vows. I know all of that. The cemetery story wasn't just a convenient lie, Catherine. It was psychological manipulation, designed to make me feel guilty for questioning your absences. You didn't just cheat on me. You made me complicit in my own humiliation. Catherine started crying, quiet tears that might have moved me a few weeks earlier before I'd learned how thoroughly she'd been deceiving me. I can't get past the calculation involved, I continued. The planning, the text messages joking about my ignorance, the satisfaction you took in maintaining the deception. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a mistake that got out of hand. This was a sustained campaign of betrayal disguised as family devotion. So there's no chance? There's divorce papers, I said. I filed them yesterday. You'll be served tomorrow morning. The divorce proceedings moved smoothly once Catherine's lawyer reviewed the evidence. The photographs, text messages, and documented timeline of deception made contested proceedings pointless. Catherine's suspended employment status and uncertain career prospects further complicated her negotiating position. Tom lost his job at the bank, as expected. The investigation revealed multiple policy violations and confirmed the supervisory conflict of interest that made their relationship problematic for workplace integrity. He moved out of Willowbrook Commons within 2 weeks, probably returning to his parents' house while searching for employment in a different city. Catherine's suspension became termination once the bank completed its review. Her personnel decisions involving Tom's department showed clear favoritism, including approved vacation requests that coincided with their Sunday afternoon schedule and performance evaluations that exceeded standard criteria for his experience level. Jennifer stopped speaking to Catherine entirely, unable to forgive the grandmother deception that had turned family grief into adultery cover story. Their relationship might recover eventually, but the trust required for sister-level intimacy would take years to rebuild, if ever. I kept the house, the business, and most of our shared assets. Catherine's lawyer argued for more equitable distribution, but documented infidelity simplified the proceedings considerably. Judges appreciate clear evidence of marital misconduct, especially when it involves elaborate deception and workplace ethics violations. Catherine moved into a small apartment across town, the kind of place where people rebuild their lives after major failures. She found part-time work at a different bank, entry-level position that paid half her previous salary. Her professional reputation in our small city was effectively finished. The final divorce hearing lasted 20 minutes. Catherine looked tired and defeated, wearing clothes that had seen better days. Her lawyer made perfunctory arguments about fair distribution and future alimony, but the evidence spoke louder than legal arguments. Mr. Waverly, the judge said, reviewing the case file, you've documented this situation thoroughly. The court finds clear evidence of marital misconduct involving sustained deception and adultery. The dissolution terms you've proposed are reasonable given the circumstances. Catherine signed the papers without looking at me. We'd barely spoken since the evening I'd revealed her Sunday afternoon activities to Jennifer. There wasn't much left to discuss once the lies were exposed and the consequences played out. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt something like closure. Not satisfaction exactly, but completion. Catherine had constructed an elaborate deception that touched every aspect of our shared life. And that deception had ultimately consumed everything she'd tried to protect. The cemetery visits had ended, obviously. No more Sunday afternoon pilgrimages to honor non-existent graves. No more peaceful returns home after 4 hours of adultery disguised as family devotion. No more sacred traditions that were actually elaborate lies designed to weaponize trust and sympathy. Catherine's grandmother really had been a wise woman, according to family stories. She'd raised Catherine and Jennifer with strong values about honesty, commitment, and respect for family bonds. If Granny could have seen how Catherine honored her memory, the old woman would have been heartbroken. But Granny was cremated, her ashes scattered at sea, her memory preserved in legitimate ways that didn't require deception or betrayal. She deserved better than being transformed into a cover story for adultery. I drove home to the house that was now entirely mine, thinking about Sunday afternoons and how I'd spend them going forward. Maybe I'd visit some actual cemeteries, pay respects to people who'd actually lived and passed and deserved remembrance. Maybe I'd find new routines that didn't involve elaborate deceptions or weaponized trust. Catherine's Sunday ritual was finally over. Her grandmother could rest in peace, knowing the lies told in her name had been exposed, and the person who dishonored her memory had faced appropriate consequences. Some traditions deserve respect. Others deserve exactly what they get when the truth comes out. The last grave Catherine visited belonged to our marriage, and unlike her grandmother, that one was definitely buried.